Hi everyone, it's Heidi from flutterbyheidi.co.uk. I'm Heidi Smith. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator based in the United Kingdom, and today I'm talking covered notepads. And this is just one of the things that they're great for craft fairs, for little thank you gifts. They're great just to have in your handbag. And there's a whole range of sizes out there. So I'm not just going to show you how to cover this size. I'm actually going to show you how I work out how to cover a notepad so that you can do it with any of these plain notepads that you can get. So this time I'm using Nature's Harvest, my lovely floral stamp set. Super images, great sentiments. You know I always like a stamp set that comes with sentiments and dies that go with it as well, which is where we get this lovely silhouette from. So let's get started. So first thing we're going to do is obviously stamp our image that we're going to just stamp, and to be as depending on what method of colouring you're using, depends on what ink you need to stamp with. So for this particular image, I actually can't remember. I think I just used a blender pen with it, so that's what I'm going to do today. So blender pens have alcohol in them, therefore we need to use Memento. If you were going to do watercolouring, you would be wanting to stamp in StazOn, because that obviously is waterproof, whereas this would bleed otherwise. So it's quite a large stamp, so I'm doing ink pad to stamp on my block, the same as equivalent of tap tap tap. So just the same as in order to get good ink coverage, we go tap tap tap. I just go over this a couple of times so we get a good coverage. The other thing I do is Stampin' Up! Ink pads always, when you flip them closed, I'll just mention, here we go, when you flip them closed, the ink pad is actually stored upside down. You can see that there. That means that you've always got good ink at the top. Now Memento doesn't. Memento, if you store it as normal, will just sink down. So I tend to just flip it over and store it upside down. Now I've been wittering, so hopefully this will still stamp okay. So I'm just going to... Beautiful, look at that. Lovely. Good image. Now I want to die cut that. I've said before, I tend to stamp, then die cut, then colour, and that's because it wouldn't be the first time that you do a lovely colouring job, really pleased with it, then you stamp it and your dime shifts. So that's what I'm doing here. I just use a little bit of post-it note tape to hold this in place, or a little piece of the top end of post-it note. When I'm lining them up, I tend to choose something that's easy to line up, like a stem, so you can see it, and then the top. And you should, with the Stampin' Up! Dies, just be able to see the outline within that image. Pop that through your die machine, and at the same time, you want to cut out your stem as well. So I'm going to pop that through and cut that out in basic white as well. Doesn't need to be thick, just needs to just standard basic white cardstock. Okay, so there we go. Here we have a nice die cut image, and pick that up. There we go. Okay. So putting my dies away at the same time. Another tip, when there's a coordinating die set, I tend to store it in with the stamp set on a piece of magnetic sheet that I just cut down to the size, and I trace around my dies with a chalk marker. That way, I'm pointing to the chalk marker. It's not actually there. I'm pointing to a blender pen. That's no use at all for tracing around things. So I use a chalk marker because I find that it dries really well. And gives you a nice image, so you can always spot whether you've got one missing. Some people number them as well. I just find by doing this at the end of a crafting session, I can make sure that before I empty my bins, I have located all my dies. So yeah, just another thing that I do. And I use one of these magnetic dishes. If I'm doing lots of dies, as you can see, it's got all sorts of things in. I have one of these magnetic dishes that captures all sorts of things. So in there, as you see, are random dies. So I know which one that's from, an old one, Above the Clouds. But I have book rings and other random bits. Anything metal goes in there. of course including my paper snips, but it means that I don't lose them, and then as and when I get a chance, I can put those away. So that's another one. If you're using particularly lots of the little ones, that's a really good thing to grab hold of. So yeah, talking about all sorts of things, not the project we're working on. So once you've die cut your lovely piece, and another thing I do is I will often die cut the outline and then stamp into them using the Stamparatus, just because that makes life a bit easier for me. Yeah, so I've used some of the pattern play paper, the host paper. I've talked about it in my other videos using Nature's Harvest. It is available as Stampin' Rewards, and I'm going Granny Apple Green. I love this bright, vibrant green. Hadn't used to love it, but I do love it now. I'm not really, because I kind of always say I'm not really a green person. So I thought, rather than sticking to the same tones as this, I'm not going to have a green flower. I thought I'm going to go real pop of pink and stick with the brights, but go for probably... let's go for poppy melon mambo. So I'm going to have some melon mambo. So I'm going to put a bit of that on onto a block. You can see that. Whoa, close. That's all I'm going to need. I'm going to grab my Daffodil Delight, or Mango Melody maybe. Yeah, Mango Melody, and do the same again, like so. And then I am obviously going to use my Granny Apple Green for my stems. Okay, so another block to hand. Okay, so you can see I'm using blocks. Anything that's non-porous would be fine. If you haven't got spare blocks, as I have, then use an old tile. If you've got an old ceramic tile, maybe. Or our silicone mat is also very useful for doing this as well. So I'm taking my blender pen, I'm just wiping that a little bit first to make sure it's not got any other colour in, and I'm just coming in and colouring those stems with our Granny Apple Green. So really bright, cheerful. And so these notepads are kind of useful. It's so much nicer than just a boring old plain notepad. And actually I find that it protects it more as well. I pop it in the side pocket of my bag, and actually it's there. And obviously as a demonstrator, it's really useful to kind of show people the sorts of things that you can create just using stamps and ink. It's not just for cards. So there's my Granny Apple Green. I'm just going to use my Mango Melody here. So when I pick up the ink, I go from kind of the darkest place out, because obviously it sort of fades away as you use it. So you can see, just by after a little while, just a few scribbles, the colour will dissipate on that, and then I can use this lovely Mango Melody. I do like a bit of pink, but I kind of like purples, so Mango Melody actually is quite nice. I find it a nice bright pink and not quite as purple as our new Magenta Madness, one of the in colours. That's quite a purple sort of pink. Obviously this one's been around quite a while now. It's a few years since we had a colour revamp as well. I wonder if we're going to get a refresh. Oh no. We always dread colour refreshes, because obviously, you know, we get used to the colours and then they change them and we, oh no, my favourite's gone, and then you find a new favourite. I was really sorry to see Lemon Lime Twist go. That was an in colour a while ago. But we got Granny Apple Green instead, which is kind of a nice bright one. So I just quite like the lemony kind of colour in those. So I'm just picking up the ink and just, as you can see, just using that to kind of colour in my petals. There we go. So you can see, really easy to do, and there's enough ink there to do several if you wanted to do them. So now let's get on to the actual covering the notepad. So in terms of the notepad, whatever notepad you want to measure the front, the depth of it, and then a bit to go over the back. You also want to measure the width because you want it to be just a touch. Now I cut that one a little bit skimpy on that one. So what I'm going to do is grab your notepad, and this is what I do. And the grid paper is great for this. All I'm going to do is just measure the width of that. So it's about 10.5. So add a millimetre on. So maybe 2 millimetres, so about 10.7. Grab a piece of paper, and you're just going to make a note of your measurements. When I have a look at the length of that, it's actually 14.5. So again, on the front, I want it to be just slightly longer, so I've got a little lip. So 14.7 long, and then the depth, I reckon that's about 0.5 centimetre, yeah, so 0.5 deep. And I have usually around about 2.5 centimetres or an inch on the back. So that's my width, but all I'm going to do is then just add these together to work out my measurements. So that's 1.7. So that comes to 17.7. So I'm going to say that's 18 centimetres and by about 10.7. Now, as I said, you might find you've already got a piece of card that just happens to be the right width. This one is about 10.7. So what I'm going to do now is cut it to length, so it's about 18. Decent sized scrap for sentiments, and then I'm going to score it. So I'm going to score at my 14.7. I'm going to add on my depth, which is 0.5 centimetre, so that's going to be 15.2. And then the remainder of that is just going to go over onto the back. So that I then want a piece of card for the front, so around about 10.5. Yep, so that's 10.5 by about 14.5. Perfect. And then for the DSP, we want it sort of again slightly smaller, so about 14.2. So I'm just taking for this a narrow border of 2 or 3 millimetres. 14.2 by about 10.2. Do you know what? That's 10.3. I'm not going to try cutting a skinny bit off that actually. Okay, all right. I will. Just to show how accurate our blades are. Look at that. Just take a skinny sliver off it. Okay. So now all we're going to do is just fold and burnish these. Useful tip I picked up from another demo. You know, occasionally we get, depending on which side you cut it, you get a slightly raised or a slightly sunken edge, and so that's a bit of a raised up edge. If you take your sand eraser, that will help get rid of it, or you can use some of these nail blocks, and you literally just run that along. That will help. Other things that are useful to use is your bone folder. So if you grab your bone folder and run that on a raised edge, and that will just smooth it out as well. So there's just a couple of little tips that I've got for you. So there's my front. So all I'm going to do is pop this on now. You might say, well, that's a bit wasteful for a notepad that's going to be thrown away. So one of the things I sometimes do, and you'll see this on my cards, is I gut, which means I take the middle out. So I just line it up at 2 centimetres, about 3/4 of an inch, on the right hand side. And then I kind of roughly cut from about 2 centimetres down to about 2 centimetres above. Like so. Like so. And so all of a sudden you've kind of got your frame and you've got your inner bit. That bit can be used for stamping and die cutting. And this is going to be covered up by your DSP. So it isn't going to matter that there's a hole in the middle there. And you just need to add your glue to that outside edge. And when you're doing a notepad cover, I do tend to use a wet glue. I find it just works better. Now what I should have done, is actually check that fitted my pad first. There go. That is just literally a millimetre around there, just gives it a nice border and obviously makes it a bit more substantial. And this is why I use my wet glue, because the wet glue is great. You want to put some wet glue on that little bit and on the back there, and quite simply pop your pad face down and fold that edge up and over, and there we have our pad. Add a little bit of glue to the back of our die cuts. If you want to be with these, I suppose actually one thing I would do is use a bit of sponge and get a really good covering, because you don't want your die cuts catching or lifting up. By that, what do I mean? So I mean literally grab one of our silicone mats and put a little bit of Tombow on there. Okay. Now, of course, I'm going to have to find one of my sponges. Easier said than done. Let's see if I can find one quickly. Okay. So just a piece of sponge. One of my sponges cut into quarters, and all you're doing is making that a gluey sponge. And if you just obviously hold it in place, because you don't want it to move, you just dab all over the back there. You're going to get a really fine layer of glue all up on the back. Pick it up. Take your pick is probably a better way than your fingers, and add that to your project. That obviously can just be washed. That goes, rinses away. You could do the same with this one as well. So again, obviously making sure you put it on non-gluey bits, you'd do exactly the same. Or in this instance, because I haven't washed my silicone mat and I don't want the front of this to get gluey, I'm just going to put a little bit over the top there. So this would make a lovely card front as well. You know, this could be just as easy. Just pop that on the front. And there you have a quick and easy notepad cover. But by using that technique on any notepad that you happen to buy, you could soon create yourself a whole host of lovely covered notepads. You know, you can pick these up in packs, 10 at a time, and how lovely. Teacher gifts maybe as well, or just a thank you little gift for friends, or just stick in your handbag and make it look pretty. Thanks for watching. Come back and see me again soon, and please do, if you've enjoyed this video, like it. It really helps with my my YouTube stats, and if you could press the subscribe button to be notified of when I do another project, please do so, because then you'll get to know what I'm done next. Thanks for watching. Come back soon. Bye.